For such a flexible class, your feat selection is going to be incredibly important. Hello everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire, here to start talking about the first edition Pathfinder Shaman and the feat selection you want to go over. Now, as I mentioned in the very start of the video, because this class is so flexible, you're really going to want to take some time to think about how you want to build your class. Now, because you can flex more into being a melee fighter or a ranged fighter with that dabbles a little bit into your spell casting, because you are a full spell casting class, as well as having hexes to play around with. This means that you have a whole array of options at your fingertips that really present a lot of opportunity for you in customizing a very, as noted, flexible class. But before we get into all of that we have available for you here today, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit the subscribe button, become a regular member here at the Gamer's Den. Or if you've already gone on ahead and listed yourself on such an incredible roster of legendary heroes, then go on down to hit the like button and share the video far and wide. Now we'll start talking about this here, and by this point it should be pretty obvious to most of you that we are really leaning into being a full spellcaster in this case, especially with our stats. We're not going to be very good at melee at all. Not that you won't have some options, some ability to fight there, but it's not really what we're going to be leaning into all that much. No, instead we are going to, like I said, focus on our spellcasting and our hexes. So that's where we're going to get the most use. So to start things off, to begin with, we have improved initiative. Now, this is as the human bonus feat if you're going with being a human. If not, then just bump everything in this list down by one. So instead, this would be your first level feat, then toughness comes in at third level, so on and so forth like that. But improved initiative is going to give you a +4 bonus to your initiative score. Now, because we don't have the best dexterity score, this is going to be an absolute boon for us, because any spellcaster that can go higher in the initiative order is going to do a lot to really start disrupting the action economy, the turn orders and the like, and being able to throw your spells out there quicker is going to be immensely helpful. But then at first level, we're picking up toughness, because a lot of our hex abilities and other abilities that we're going to have picked up along the way here require you to be within about 30 feet or so. Extra hit points are going to be useful, and at first level this will get you an extra 3 hit points, then +1 hit point for each level after. So that'll be a pretty solid boost to making you survivable in the long run. The fact that you also have medium armor to go along with this, and you're a divine spellcaster, just makes this even better. And also, this wouldn't be a bad way if you decided to go more melee. This wouldn't be a bad option for you to have either in that instance. By third level, we're going to pick up the accursed hex feat, because by second level, we are grabbing our first hex. Hexes, limited to being used once every 24 hours against a target, can now be used again. Now, it's only one additional usage, but for hexes that force your opponents to re-roll and take the worst result out of those options, or require saves or have some severe penalties be applied against them, this is going to be absolutely worth its weight in gold, especially at these earlier levels where opponents are going to be more likely to fail. Heck, even as you advance in level, being able to impose this kind of a penalty on a target is just going to be awesome for you to have. Then at 5th level, going along with that kind of a theme, we are going to pick up Persistent Spell. This puts a +2 spell level increase on the prepared spell that you apply it to, so if normally it's a 2nd level spell, it now takes a 4th level spell slot. When a creature hit by a persistent spell succeeds on its save, it must make a 2nd throw. If it fails, then it fails regardless of the first roll. So this can just make it so that opponents are, again, more likely to fail and stumble their way into saves. And this will combo really nicely with the accursed hex feat and some of your different hex options that you should be picking up along the way here. Then at 7th level, we're going to snag Knowledgeable Spellcaster. Now, this does have a couple of requirements. First, that you have a knowledge skill at 5 ranks. The specific feat does lift the knowledges specifically, but things like knowledge religion are what's going to apply here, or dungeoneering. So, and you also have to be a 7th level spellcaster, hence why we're grabbing it here. When you succeed at your chosen knowledge check to identify a creature's weaknesses, you can learn one less thing to gain a +3 bonus on caster level checks to overcome spell resistance. If you have 10 or more ranks, you can learn 2 fewer things about the creature type for a +5 caster level bonus. And not just creature type, but that particular creature entity itself. So a +5 caster level bonus is huge, and these bonuses will stack with options like spell penetration to help give you boosts overall. So that's going to be hugely useful. Absolutely going to be staggering, especially since you may not all of your spells are going to be able to ignore spell resistance. They're not all going to have those effects. So being able to overcome that extra additional barrier of defense that your targets will more and more likely have as you advance in level is going to be useful to you. And it also gives more emphasis on using your different knowledge skills in order to gain those bonuses. Then at 9th level, we are going to grab Improved Familiar. Now, your spirit animal works as a wizard's familiar, except for there are some specific differences, such as your spirit animal being how you commune with the greater spirit entities at large and gain access to preparing your divine spells. But other than that, it still is actually a familiar, so you can select from the expanded familiar list. A couple of options come to mind, and ideally you should probably stick with things that are somehow tied to the overall spirits you go with. In particular with this build, we're going with a heaven spirit, so creatures that are more associated with larger celestial things, like a Seru could come to mind for the Luckbringer ability, or the Fairy Dragon for their breath weapon. Fairy Dragons especially, imagine those being looking like star maps, or even Seru, which are almost like artificial 1-foot sized blue elephants with fangs all over their bodies. Those can be incredibly neat and just evoke an incredible visual as well, but their abilities are especially useful, and they're particularly intelligent creatures as well, so they can offer you some pretty interesting options, but it all depends a little bit. Fairy dragons require you to be at least within 1 step of being chaotic good, so if you're going with a different alignment that's removed from that, there are other options on the list that have different alignment requirements. So just play around with it and see what your DM is willing to let you do with that. Then at 11th level, we're going to grab Divine Interference. As an immediate action, when an opponent in 30 feet hits with an attack, spend a spell to make them re-roll the attack with a penalty equal to the spell level on the re-roll. You can't use this again on the same creature for 1 day. So immediate action, that's pretty nice. That's not going to be eating into your action economy too much, and you don't have a lot of abilities that eat into your immediate action, so this is going to be a solid use. It does hurt that you're having to burn spell slots to do this, especially since you don't have the broadest number of spell slots. You have 4 at each spell level, and you can't spend 0 level spells on this, so you have to burn at least a 1st level spell. It is nice that it gives a -1 to the attack penalty, but by this level, that's not going to be much at all. Just the fact that you're going to make an opponent re-roll is going to be useful. And the specific points where you are probably going to want to use this are when the opponent in question roll a critical hit. They confirm their critical hit. Forcing them to re-roll that critical is going to be massive. Even if they still end up with a regular hit, you're still saving your friend and ally, or possibly yourself, from taking an incredible amount of damage. So this is a great feat, a great use of those spell slots, especially the lower level spell slots that may not be quite so useful anymore. Because the concern again is not necessarily making them miss, so that's a great plus if you do. This is specifically in mind for negating critical hits. Then at 13th level, we are going to move on to pick up Cherry Blossom spell, and this is a really interesting feat option, meta magic feat specifically. It adds +3 to the spell level, so if it's a 3rd level spell, it will now take a 6th level spell slot, but living creatures or a creature that take damage from the spell also take 2 points of damage to strength, dexterity, and constitution, or intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, your choice of which. If the spell doesn't allow a save, they can make a fortitude save to negate the effect. Aegis or immortal creatures are immune to the effect, so undead creatures are going to be largely immune, outsiders are going to be immune, but living creatures are going to be frequent and common enough and threatening enough that this should still be useful to you. But you're not going to use this on spells that are like single time damage. This is going to be useful for something, say like, Call Lightning, where you have up to 10 rounds of damage being dealt. Even if they only fail 3 times, that's 6 points of damage to strength, dexterity, and constitution, or intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. In particular, those last 3 are great for targeting enemy casters. Enemy casters who maybe don't have the reflex saves necessary to negate the damage, and even if, potentially poor fortitude saves as well, if you're using a spell that doesn't allow a save normally. And reducing their spellcasting stat by 6 points, that's a huge reduction on bonus spells, on spell save DCs, all kinds of options there. Not only that, but that's going to be reducing a will save as well, which will make them much, much more vulnerable. This is a really cool feat. Next, at 15th level, we're going to grab Dazing Spell. Also has a +3 spell level increase. Creatures or a creature that take damage from the spell become dazed for a number of rounds equal to the original spell level. And dazed, remember, means that the target just doesn't really take any actions. And again, if you use this on a 3rd or a 4th level spell, that's 3 or 4 rounds where they're doing nothing. Successful saves negate the daze effect. If the spell doesn't allow a save, then a will save will negate the effect. So they do have a chance of getting out of it, but if you have any kind of area of effect spells that are going to do damage, then this can potentially take a number of targets out of the fight, really, really affecting the flow of combat and making those targets much more vulnerable, or at the very least non-threatening to you for a decent amount of time. Really, really does a lot to turn the tide of battle. But then from there we come to 17th and 19th level feats, and really I couldn't think of a whole lot to round things out here. There's a combat defense training, that's a combat feat that allows you to count your combat maneuver defense using your hit dice as the modifier. So if you're level 17, that's a +17 to your combat maneuver defense and all of that. So that can be an interesting option, especially since we're not really focused on being aggressive in melee. We're focused on being more defensive if the fight comes to us. That can be an incredible option for you, because DMs like myself will try to find ways of shutting spellcasters down through those kinds of means. But it really all just kind of depends here, because maybe you decide to play around with some of the different spirit options and decide, maybe you want to tweak this build a little bit. This gives you a little bit of wiggle room here, and even with that said, these guides are meant to just be that, guides, nothing set in stone. Take it all with a grain of salt and look at this as finding interesting options for making your character that much more fun and adding a little bit more effectiveness to them. But what do you think? Go on down to the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Did you like today's video? Did you dislike it? Let me know in the comments down below. Hit those like or dislike buttons and we'll engage in discussion. And remember, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit the subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamers Den. But with all that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your Master of Lore and Storyteller Extraordinaire. Thank you all so very much for your time, and you all have yourselves a good night.